Okay, enough of that. So here's another little giant steps lesson. I made a previous lesson on giant steps where I'm showing some licks, useful licks or idioms that you can use over it, and I think those are important and helpful. But I think also what happens to a lot of players when they're trying to figure out how to play with this kind of stuff or this tune is that they learn those licks and those phrases that we all kind of learn. I guess it's coming out of the Coltrane solo and whatever. But like you can't really play over the tune because all you're doing is kind of struggling, and then if you're lucky you get one of those licks in there. So you need to find more ways to work on this tune so that you can learn how to play over it. So I call this lesson 7 steps to giant steps. So I have 7 little ideas or things that you can do so to get you closer to the goal of being able to play effortlessly over giant steps. What you need is some kind of recording device. I have a loop pedal. You need a metronome and lots of coffee. I always use coffee when I practice. I think it's very important. So the first thing we can do is pretty obvious. We're gonna make the first half of this lesson, I'm gonna make giant steps easier, and then we're gonna make it more difficult, and I'll explain why. But the first thing is to make it easier, and the obvious thing is to slow it down. And I think some of you have probably heard Pat Metheny's version of giant steps where he plays it as a bossa nova. So let's do that. Let's just slow it down, and I'm gonna make a little backing track here with my loop pedal, so hang on. Yeah, I think you see the point. It's a lot easier, obviously, to play over this than the fast tempo. And so I think the problem a lot of times is that you're just not used to the changes. You're not used to playing those different intervallic movements, bass lines. So you have to get it into your system, into your ears and your thinking, and also under your fingers, obviously. So especially the ears. If you're not used to hearing those changes, it's going to be very difficult. So this can help you get used to that without having to play super fast and what have you. So don't try to play those licks when you're practicing this. Try to just play anything, noodling, just playing melodic lines, right? You can make it even slower if you want. And what we can do is, just let me erase this here. The next step is to make the chords, the chord changes longer. So each chord is going to be twice as long. So I'm going to make that backing track also as a bossa, I guess. So here we go. So obviously this is even easier. And again, we're just getting used to hearing the changes and thinking of the next chord. I think that's the main issue for a lot of people, is that it's hard to think of ahead of the next chord coming up and keeping track of which 2/5 am I on again. Is it the one that goes to G, or is it the one that goes, you know what I mean? So because they're all very similar. There's no center tonic in this tune. There's like 3 tonics, right? So it's easy to get lost. So this will help you. And sorry, just erasing the track. So next thing we can do is to get even more used to these different or unusual movements. We can isolate one section of the tune and work on that. So, for example, it's B major 7 to D7 to G, right? So looping that, if you will. So I'll do that. So it's an unusual thing in traditional jazz anyway, like instead to go from B major 7 to D7. So let's just get used to that, right? And you'll discover things like, I realized that it's kind of like going from B major to B minor. So maybe that'll help if I think of playing B major and then play B minor. See if that works. It's a different approach. So by practicing this way, you actually discover things which gets you away from that kind of thing, right? Like all of a sudden I realized that there's a different way I can approach these changes by thinking of it that way. So there's lots of benefits from this. Now we're going to make it more difficult instead of making it easier. And that might seem strange to some people, but if you think about it, it's not that strange, I don't think, because if you think of how athletes practice, they often make the conditions harder than the actual competition is going to be. And I think it helps to think like an athlete sometimes. So the idea is that if you're making the situation harder than it's going to be, the actual real situation is going to feel easier. So it's kind of like tricking yourself in a way. So how can we make it more difficult? Well, we can cut a few beats and make it an odd time signature. This is very common, right? So if we cut one beat, we get 3/4. So instead of 4 beats per bar, 3. So the changes are actually happening quicker. So I'll make a backing track in 3/4. 1, 2, 3, so I got a little carried away there. So it also is really, really good. I've talked about this before as well, is that when you're doing this, your licks, your favorite pet phrases don't work. You have to kind of adjust your licks or try to come up with something new. So it's really helpful. You can also play it in 7, right? Which is very, very common to play these days. To play giant steps in 7, it's almost a little bit cliche. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to skip that. Let's move on here. So the next thing we can do is to play it crazy fast. So even faster than it's supposed to be played. And so I'm gonna use the metronome, and I'm not gonna do it absurdly fast. For me, 300 is fast, so very fast. I can't remember how fast. So if this is 150, that's it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm gonna make it back track. So here's a fast backing track. So I'm gonna try and price that. Just maybe playing chords first. One thing you can do is just try and play 2 notes, like maybe octaves. So let's try that. Maybe fifths. You see, it's very hard to do, but and this is actually not that fast. You could do this way fast. I'm probably playing slower than the original tune. But for me, this is I need to price this. If I don't really play this tune professionally, so I don't feel like I have to. But it's a good challenge to really challenge yourself to be able to play these monster tempos, right? So, and also again, it forces you to play differently, because I can't play my scales and regular stuff in this tempo. I need to simplify. And I think, again, the problem is keeping up with the changes in your head. Like, where am I? That's especially at this tempo. So you really develop that ability to, and also you need to think ahead. You have to be constantly thinking about what's happening next, right? So this helps you to do that. And there is another way you can do it, make it even harder. And that's kind of inspired by Kenny Garrett's recording of this tune. So I'm going to make a little backing track based on his recording. So I don't think he's soloing like this, but he plays the tune kind of like with one beat or I guess 2 beats per chord. So I'll try to do that, but I'm going to slow it down here. 130. sounds totally ridiculous, right? And it's like, what is he doing? But it is it helps you with a kind of forward motion, thinking ahead, because it's like someone is pushing you to just keep playing, and it's gonna help you hopefully. And it's also gonna hopefully it's gonna give you that illusion of when you're actually going back to playing it the way it's supposed to be. It's like, oh, this is easy, because all of a sudden you have so much time with each chord, right? So last thing is to play it in a different key, which is something any contemporary jazz practicing player kind of works on. So if just changing to C major is going to make it really, just try to play the changes. It's actually really hard, even though we're just transposing it one half step up, right? So it makes you think totally differently. And I find myself, when I do this, I find that I come up with ideas like that I wouldn't come up with for some reason in B. If I'm playing it in C, and then I can transpose those ideas back to B. It just gives you a different, it's a fresh look on the tune, because it's easy to get so stuck in these idioms, these, or the cliches that it's just changing key might get you out of that. So playing it in C to the so here we're in C. Let's see how this goes. Maybe I'm in over my head here, we'll see. So that's kind of how I can play over that tune in C. And actually I'm playing it a little bit different. Sometimes I'm playing the same kind of stuff, but I'm also finding myself in new territory, as it were. So those were the 7 steps to giant steps. I hope that you find some of those techniques useful, and I shall see you next time.